My goodness, is it not truly magnificent? Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are ready. I never thought this moment would come, and yet here it is today. The answers to the questions that we've all been waiting for. I present to you, in all of its splendor and glory, this donut. It's not just any ordinary donut, though. My mom was making cookies for the fair yesterday. Today, she's making donuts, so fresh donut right out of the oven. I'm not going to eat it on camera like I did with the cookie yesterday, though. I've already been eating it. It is truly an amazing donut, and I just hope that wherever you are in the world, you have an amazing donut to snack on as you watch this video. Okay, what are we actually talking about? Oh, yes, of course! Nozarashi Yachiru Kenpachi Shikai Bankai finally revealed! Oh, my God. Okay, so, few people have already talked about this, Simo Urahara and then Mr. Tomo. I'll leave links to their videos below. I was honestly debating even to make this video, but I just wrapped up the Lieutenant series not long ago, and the last of the Lieutenants I discussed just by happen chance, because I did it in sort of like a random order, was Yachiru. So, you know, it's not too long ago that I was making a video about Yachiru, and I was, like, asking all these questions, like, okay, what is Yachiru? Like, is she a Shinigami? Is she a Zanpakuto spirit? Is she a weird hybrid of the two? You know, because other Shinigami can see her, but then she's also clearly connected to Kenpachi's Bankai in some way, you know, and also, like, when Kenpachi goes into his Bankai, he's like a berserker, and Yachiru's sort of like guiding him on the battlefield, and yet nobody can see Yachiru in that state, so I'm like, what's up? So I already asked a lot of these questions, and now we finally get an answer to that. I'm just gonna throw it up here on the screen, and then we'll move on from there. This is from Kubo, right from, you know, the author of Bleach. You know, this is his words. Basically what this is, from what I understand, there's a website that came out back in January, and I sort of remember hearing about this, but I never looked into the website itself, called Club Outside, club spelled with a K because it's cool, and it's also Kubo. But yeah, and on that website, I guess you can basically ask Kubo questions, and he'll answer them, like not every single one, and there's some stuff that's like, you know, really important information that he doesn't want to reveal about the story, but it's sort of like the Bleach equivalent to the SBS. So I was looking at a lot of translated answers, and if you can look up a list, some of them are really cool. And much like the SBS questions in One Piece involving Oda, there's a lot of boob questions on these as well. But anyway, so this is the answer to the question, like, what's up with Yachiru being related to, you know, Nozarashi, Zanpakuto spirit? What's up with that? Yachiru represents a form of Kenpachi's Bankai that was separated from its main body, and which gained the power of a Shinigami upon receiving a name from Kenpachi. That probably is the single most important part of this, but we'll get back to that in a second. The true embodiment of Nozarashi's Bankai is that of a grown woman. Just imagine Zangetsu and Tensa Zangetsu. That should make it easier to understand, alright? So that was Kubo's answer involving the situation with Yachiru. So, first off, let's get this out of the way. Oh my god, yes, we finally know, yes! Okay, so we got that out of the way. Alright, cool. Now, back to business. Okay, so, let's talk about Zangetsu, Tensa Zangetsu, really quick, okay? So every time Ichigo would go into his inner world when he was in his Shikai form, this is the man that was waiting for him on the inside. Later on, we found out that this is actually the representation of Ichigo's Quincy abilities, but it's also important to mention, because of the circumstances involving Ichigo's birth and his mom and his dad, the powers, I guess it's not, you know, perfect to think of them as separate things, like Quincy powers, Shinigami, Hollow powers are all like different things. Ichigo is a very interesting being, and everything's sort of like melded together, okay? But anyway, this was the representation of Zangetsu in his Shikai, that of like an older man, of like in his maybe 60s, maybe 50s. Okay, sorry to anybody that I called you old, but okay. But then later, when Ichigo goes into his inner world during the Fake Karakura Town arc, while he's in his Bankai state, Tensa Zangetsu, it is actually a much younger version of the Yuha Bak inside of him that appears, like a teenage age, about the same age as Ichigo, pretty much, okay? So that right then and there set a precedence that Shikai and Bankai, you know, it's not just like a different ability or like an upgrade or whatever. You know, when you go into your inner world, it really does affect the way that that looks and the way your Zanpakuto spirit appears, whether or not you're in Shikai or Bankai, alright? In fact, in the last arc of Bleach, it was totally possible for a Shinigami's Bankai to be stolen, but they could still access Shikai. So, you know, that was a little confusing for me for a long time. Like, okay, are Shikai and Bankai, I always thought they were like just mutually connected to the Zanpakuto spirit. So when the Quincy's started stealing Bankais, I'm like, okay, how can they have the Bankai of the Zanpakuto spirit, but the Shinigami could still have the Zanpakuto and go into Shikai? Aren't they connected? Aren't they the same thing? So that was a little confusing to me at first, but just kind of understand that they are sort of separate realms, so to speak, okay? And so with that being said, Kenpachi has a Bankai that takes the form of a grown woman, apparently according to Kubo, and the Shikai represents Yachiru, who broke off at one point and was separated from Nozarashi, or the Zanpakuto spirit, and then when Kenpachi gave Yachiru her name when they first met, boom, that is when she became a Shinigami. Alright? So, this was a thing when I did the Yachiru video. I thought about, like, okay, maybe the way that this worked was Kenpachi originally found his Zanpakuto, the Asauchi that would later become Nozarashi, on the corpse of a dead Shinigami. Alright, and then he just had that sword for a long time, poured his Ryatsu into it, because that's essentially what happens. The Asauchis are just like an empty vessel, and then the Shinigami fills that up with their own Ryatsu over the years, after, you know, using it in battle an X number of times, and then eventually they are bonded together, and like part of their soul is, you know, split off and represents the Zanpakuto, or, you know, the blade is you, okay, that's who you are, alright, it's not a separate being, it's basically you, just in a different form, okay? But, considering Kenpachi, you know, he was raised in such of like a primal, kind of like animal sort of way. Maybe this ties back into the beast realm as well in some way. I don't know. He didn't really listen to his Zanpakuto. He wasn't really interested in like Shikai or Bankai or forming a relationship with his sword or anything like that. And so my theory was like, as sort of like a last-ditch effort to get Kenpachi to listen, Nozarashi left the sword and took the human form, or the Shinigami form, of Yachiru so they could actually interact. You know, since Kenpachi was not going into his inner world to interact with Nozarashi, Nozarashi came into, you know, the Shinigami realm, or, you know, the Soul Society, in order to interact with Kenpachi, alright? That was kind of the basic idea. So, that's sort of half right and half wrong, you know? It's like the Bankai is that of a grown woman, and we've yet to see that spirit as like a character, but we have seen Yachiru, alright? So, perhaps that was the case there, that, you know, it doesn't really explain here in this question, like, how exactly Yachiru, like, separated from Nozarashi. How did that work? You know, separated from the main body. But there's also precedence for that, because, of course, Shunsui has Katen Kyokatsu, right? And that's two different bodies there. In fact, it's actually implied with Shunsui that Ohana, the older woman that's part of his sword, Shunsui had, like, a romantic relationship, and then things went a little bit, you know, hot and heavy, and then that's how the child form of Katen Kyokatsu came into existence. I think he says, like, Ohana gave birth to this other spirit in order to hide Nanao's Zanpakuto, alright? So it's a little bit convoluted, and of course Zanpakutos, you know, and their spirits are different depending on the Shinigami. So with the case with Shunsui and Katen Kyokatsu, it seemed they had, like, a romantic sort of relationship, and then the relationship with, like, Ichigo and Zangetsu is different, which is different from Hyorimaru and Toshiro's relationships, you know, how that kind of thing goes. So let's just assume that. Let's assume as like, okay, because he's not listening, Yachiru split off from the main Nozarashi and then, you know, appeared in front of Kenpachi in, I think it was in just the Zaraki district. No, it was Kusajishi, because that's where they met, because that's her last name, okay? Zaraki is from Zaraki, which is the 80th district, which is like the worst district ever. By the way, side note, tangent, what's beyond Area 80 in the Rukongai, you know, because it's like, okay, the Seireite's in the center, and then there's 80 districts of Rukongai that kind of expand outwards into the country of, you know, the Soul Society and everything like that. But once you reach the perimeter, like, is there an edge? Is there a barrier wall or something? Like, if you just keep walking in Area 80 long enough, you'll get to a barrier or just a cliff that goes down. I might make a video about that. Geography is everything for Bleach. I know a lot of people have been wanting that at some point. Okay, tangent over. Now, it's possible that when Kenpachi, after he slaughtered all those people, you know, for like, I don't know, like a regular Tuesday for him, when Kenpachi first met Yachiru, and Yachiru was like crawling toward him, and, you know, he's like, you know, stay away from my blade, you know, this is a instrument meant for killing, it's not a plaything, and Yachiru was not afraid of it. Obviously that would make sense. It's not that she was 100% the sword, but she was part of the sword, or that's where she came from originally, okay? Now, another thing to mention here is the only people people that were present at that moment was Kenpachi and Yachiru. Everybody else around them was dead, okay? So what if Yachiru was invisible at this point, like wasn't a proper Shinigami, really was just an extension of the Zanpakuto? However, Kenpachi did not know who she was. Kenpachi did not know this was an extension of his sword. He didn't even know the name Nozarashi yet, right? So he gave Yachiru a name, and the name that he gave was, of course, the one person he always respected, Yachiru Unohana, the first Kenpachi, of course, and then Kusajishi because the region they're in, okay? And Kenpachi even shows Yachiru how to write it. You know, he even writes the hiragana and the kanji on the ground. It's like, this is how you write it. It's the name of the one person I admired in my life, okay? Now, you know, before the last arc of Bleach, this would have not have made too much sense, okay? It would just be like, what? You know, Kenpachi gives her a name and then she becomes a Shinigami? How does that work? Well, Ichibei Hyosubi, baby! That's how that works, okay? During the last arc, we get introduced to the Zero Squad and then Ichibei, and Ichibei is like the entire focus of his power was the ability to name things, okay? He was the first member of the Zero Squad, one of the first Shinigami ever given life by the Soul King, maybe actually the first Shinigami to ever be given life by the Soul King, and I don't know if that was outright explained, but it feels like it was. And so it's revealed that when he names things, like, that's important. It has weight to it. It's not just like, I name this, I name that. Like, that's called Zanpakuto, the spells are called Kido, the outfits are called Shihakshos, that's the Seirete, that's the Soul Society, whatever, call it a day. No, the names themselves actually have power, and this was exemplified when when Yuha was fighting against Ichibei, and Yuha kept using his name over and over again, like, Ichibei Hyosubi, you will fall, Ichibei Hyosubi. And Ichibei is just like, keep on using my name like that, man. Just keep on saying it over and over again. You're gonna get your throat crushed. It's gonna happen. That's not even up to me. That's just what's going to happen, right? And you know Yuha, because he thought he was better than everybody else, which, to be fair at this point, yeah, he kind of was, kept using Ichibei's name despite his warnings, and eventually, yeah, he did get his throat crushed. He could not speak anymore. Now, yes, Yuha was able to get around this by just using his voice power, you know, the Stern Ritter ability to bestow the voice to him, and so he was able to speak after that, not really a big deal. But that really showed what Kubo was going for involving Ichibei's power, alright? It's not just like, oh, I'm the first Shinigami, and I got the first Zanpakuto, and the first Shikai, and the first Bankai, and my ability is, to summon a giant energy beam that kills everything. Boom! You know, he was going with something more metaphysical, more abstract, the concept of names. And then the ability of Shirafude, his Zanpakuto, was like the power of black, you know, gathering all of the black everywhere in the Soul Society and the Shinigami have, like the Shihakshos and everything, to give him more power, okay? And so, a little bit abstract there, right? But the power of naming goes beyond just Ichibei actually giving a name. It's like when a parent gives the name to a child or a pet, or when a builder, you know, names a structure that they built with their own two hands. Like, that has meaning. There's something more to it than just, you know, just the actual act of a name, okay? And so, with that in mind, that actually makes sense now what Kubo was going for here. So Kenpachi meets his Zanpakuto spirit, but doesn't know it's his Zanpakuto spirit, so he gives her a name as sort of like, you know, Kenpachi's like child or something, I guess. And so that name was what made her a Shinigami. Because Kenpachi referred to Yachiru as a Shinigami, boom, she became a Shinigami. And a Zanpakuto spirit still. So sort of like, yeah, kind of like a hybrid, kind of. But that's why, you know, all the other Shinigami could identify her as such, as another Shinigami. Like Ikkaku and Yumachika and all the Gotei. They were able to see Yachiru and interact with her, and she was made the lieutenant, okay? Because that's how Kenpachi named her, and that is what she became, a Shinigami, alright? Now, later on, after Kenpachi finds out the name of his Zanpakuto, after he defeats Unohana, there's the voice that can be heard speaking to him in the distance, this disembodied voice coming from his sword, and the voice says, "It's nice to meet you finally, Kenpachi Zaraki. You can finally hear me. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Nozarashi." So that was the Bankai. That was the voice of the older woman that embodies Kenpachi's Bankai, introducing herself to Kenpachi Zaraki, okay? It's like, my name is Nozarashi. Now, it was shortly after that, when Kenpachi fought against Gremmy, that Yachiru disappears. And that was because, at that point, Kenpachi knew the true name, Nozarashi. So, do not think of it as Yachiru's real name is Nozarashi, and Yachiru was just a name that Kenpachi gave her and it doesn't mean anything. No, they both mean something. Yachiru Kusajishi is the lieutenant of Squad 11, and she was a Shinigami. And Nozarashi is the spirit of the sword that Kenpachi wields, alright? So, it might have been actually a choice that Yachiru had to make at that moment when Kenpachi showed up and used Nozarashi against Gremmy and sliced a damn meteor in half. Perhaps Yachiru herself had a choice. She could stay Yachiru and be the lieutenant of Squad 11 and always be by Kenpachi's side and all of that jazz. But she could also go back to being who she really was. And perhaps when Kenpachi realized the name was Nozarashi and the Bankai spirit introduced herself, that was when Yachiru also remembered who she was and where she came from, what she was part of. And so she felt like, unless I rejoin my other self, my other half, so to speak, Kenpachi, Kenny, cannot truly become the strongest. You know, he can't truly become the greatest Shinigami, the most powerful Kenpachi, unless I am, you know, I rejoin the Zanpakuto spirit that I split from originally. And so that was the moment Yachiru decided to go back to being part of Nozarashi. And then we see her later on when Kenpachi wakes up. Once again, we never seen the grown-up version. And I imagine it would be both now. I imagine like it would be like Katen Kyokatsu, where it would be like an older lady and then it would be like a child. And it's not like Yachiru's gonna like disappear into like a fog of Ryatsu and then merge back together with the main body. It's going to be that of an adult woman and then Yachiru as well. And that represents Kenpachi's power. Okay, let's just go with that. Right. So yeah, that also explains, you know, how like when she disappeared, her Shihakusho remained behind. Okay, because that wasn't like part of her being. That was just something that, you know, they gave her because she was a Shinigami. But then she decided to give up what it meant to be a Shinigami and sort of kind of surrender her name and become a Zanpakuto spirit. All right. And this is actually kind of tragic when you think about it, because if Yachiru did actively make this decision, that means that, like, you know, all the people, all of the friends that she made while she was a lieutenant of the Gotei, you know, Yumachika, Ikaku, Maki Maki, remember him, Orihime, you know, Jiggles, as was Yachiru's nickname for Orihime, of course, Ichigo and Uryu and everybody, she'll never really be able to interact with those characters again, because she is now a Zanpakuto spirit. You know, and it doesn't seem like she can switch back and forth between being a Shinigami and being a Zanpakuto spirit. She had to choose one or the other, and she chose to be Kenpachi's spirit so he could attain new heights and all that stuff, right? It's also, that's maybe the reason why when Kenpachi goes into his proper Bankai and he's a berserker, it's Yachiru that guides Kenpachi and not his actual Bankai spirit, who's an older woman, because they don't really have as much of like a back and forth. They don't really understand each other so much. They sort of just met, Kenpachi and the Bankai spirit, but Kenpachi and Yachiru, they have been partners. They've been captain and lieutenant in the 11th Division for years and years at this point. So they trust each other, all right? And so that's what I think, that's the reason why, you know, Yachiru was the one that's like, oh, okay, Kenpachi, you know, your Bankai is super powerful, but I have to like regulate the power that comes in and out of you. All right, so let's go attack the giant Viking guy and like all that kind of stuff, right? So that was the answer Kubo gave. Once again, go check out the videos by Mr. Tomo and Simo Uehara, because those are pretty cool as well. Yeah, that was one that, I mean, like, it was already fresh in my mind to talk about it, and that is something that we've all been curious about ever since the final arc of Bleach. Will this information be revealed in the anime? I mean, perhaps. I mean, part of the reason why maybe Kubo is doing this, why he's answering these questions, I mean, it might just to give closure to a lot of fans of the story, but it also might be like, hey, Kubo might have more of a hands-on sort of, you know, influence to the anime. And so if that's the case, this might actually be explained at some point. So he talks about it like, yeah, Kenpachi's Bankai is that of a grown woman. We might actually get to see that character in the final arc. Like, there might be a moment, like, after Unohana dies and Kenpachi hears the voice, you know, my name is Nozarashi, nice to meet you. Instead of it just being the sword that we saw in the manga, in the anime, who knows, we might see, like, the ghostly image of a woman appearing next to Kenpachi, introducing herself. Okay, and so we get to actually see that character the way that Kubo draws her, right? Okay, so that's how that goes there. But anyway, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go get yourself a nice donut, Halloween themed with the orange and black sprinkles. That's pretty cool. And yes, always know the power of a name is truly the greatest force in this world. That is why I named this brick, for it is alliteration. And that is where he gets his strength. Thanks for watching, everybody. No bat facts today, but yeah, later, everyone. Next time.